today I've come with a heart and a mind to encourage you. I feel that the Lord this week, as I was preparing, was saying that the church, that Hub City Church, that those who will join us online, that they need to be encouraged, they need to be strengthened this week. And so I've come to do that with a message today titled, You've Come Too Far to Quit Now. Turn to your neighbor right now and just say, you've come too far to quit now. And I mean that, and I believe it, that you've come too far to quit now. You know, most of our year is packed with a bunch of mundane days, bunch of boring days, a bunch of days where we wake up like the old 80s movie, the Groundhog Day. You know, Groundhog Day, it's like, same job, driving the same car, pushing the same button to close the garage door, eating the same thing at the same places with the same people. That life can be mundane, it could even be boring, and I would like to say it can be a grind. Right? Most years, you're going to have about 5 to 10 things. You have a really cool vacation. Somebody graduated. Maybe there was a new birth. Maybe there's a new season or a different season came to an end. But you can count those big days, those big shifts on maybe one hand, maybe two hands. But there's 300 other days where it can feel like an utter grind. And I want to speak to you today. I want you to understand that the mundane is not meaningless. That the mundane is not meaningless. Many times we feel that way. It's like, oh man, I'm so bored with just the things that are happening. I just wish it was different. I wish my life was different. I wish I was doing something more exciting. I wish that the dreams and the goals that I had, I wish that those things would be now, not in the future. And for many of us, we wish away the season that we're in now. And we believe that what we need most is out there and it's not here. And I want to shake that up today. That what you need most is not out there. It's not in the future. With God, what you need most is here in the now. And I want to bring clarity to this today and understand that you've come too far to quit now. Some of you have invested in so many areas. You've invested in school. You've invested in your marriage. You've invested in raising your kids. You've invested in your career. You've invested money. You've invested time, blood, sweat, and tears. And some of you are in a season where you're going, is this all what it's cracked up to be? Is it worth it to keep going? Is it worth it to keep pressing? Is it worth it to keep growing? Is it worth it to keep getting healthy? And I want to say to you today, you've come too far to quit now. That if you are to quit on the dreams and the things that God, the purpose that He's locked in your life, if you quit now, everything that you've done to this point will become meaningless. Then nobody will remember all of the efforts. They won't remember all the time, all the sacrifice. They'll just remember that you quit. And I'll just say this, nobody likes a quitter. And so we're going to press through, and I'm going to teach you today from the Word of God how to endure and actually thrive in a time when you feel like you're just in a grind. You know, thinking about, things always being out there and not here. I remember Veronica and I, you may not know this, but we started dating when we were 14 years old. So although we're going to be celebrating 28 years of marriage, we've actually been in each other's lives for over 30 years. And I remember us being 14 years old, and I said to my parents in the last service, man, what were you guys thinking letting us date that young? I'm going to say, if you're in here and you're young, don't do that. It was just dumb. We broke up every other date. Anybody have that kind of relationship? It's like, you looked at me funny, it's over, It's like you came and your hair looked jacked, it's over, whatever. Of course, I'm being silly here. But I remember that as we were graduating high school and the prospect of us becoming married, getting married, man, it was so exciting. And I never worked on the season we were in because I remember just being goal-oriented and achievement-oriented. So I'm like, when we get married, then life is going to get good. Worked on a wedding, but didn't work on a marriage. And sometimes we live that way. You know what? When we just have kids, then everything's going to be right. But you didn't work on being a parent. You just were dreaming about having kids. Well, you know what? When I start that business and the business takes off, it's going to be awesome. Well, you worked on being a boss in your mind, but you never learned how to be a good employee. Some of you in your mind, it's like you want to be a good leader, but you're not working on being a good follower first. And you have to understand that some of us are like, it's out there, but I'm here to tell you that it's here. It's here in the now. It's not what's to come. It's here in the now. I remember us, once we got married, it's like, if we just have kids, it's going to be incredible. But we were dreaming of having kids a few years later. Well, guess what? Surprise. We know with 2 kids, and they're not even a year apart. We have 2 children that were 11 months apart. We got Irish twins, yo. And man, I remember once we got the kids, I was like, man, we're going to be set, babe, once these kids get out of diapers, because this is killing all of our finances, man, paying for these poopy diapers. And then once they were out of diapers, it's like, oh, it'll be glorious when they finally go to school. Well, how many of you know that with that schoolwork and all that stuff comes more responsibility? Then it was like, you know what? It'll be great once they graduate high school and leave to college. And then everything will be great. We were always thinking about what was to come and not thinking about the now. And here's the sad part is that I look back on my life now, being a little bit wiser and a few years older, and I realized that I wished away some of the most important moments and some of the most important seasons. And some of you don't realize that today you're doing the same thing. You're wishing away the season that you're in because maybe it's boring. Maybe it's difficult. Maybe it's not what you thought it would be. And so you're wishing it away like, oh, when this kid just gets out of my hair, oh man. And not realizing that God has ordained the moments that you're living in right now and that he wants you to embrace those moments instead of wishing them away. I always believed that there was something else out there that I had to achieve. I always believed that there was something else that was going to make things better. But if you're wise, you'll realize that once you achieve one thing, there's always something else to achieve. That once you conquer one thing, there's always something else that you have to conquer. That once you're in one situation, there's always going to be another situation. And so I want to challenge you today to think this way, that it's more about the now. It's more about what God wants to do now and not to be so far-minded and always, thinking ahead to the point where you can't enjoy now. Now, I'm not saying today that you shouldn't have goals. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have dreams and aspirations. What I am saying is that you need to learn to put them in priority. And that for some of you, you hate the season you're in right now because you feel like you're in such a grind. But listen, your grind is actually a gift. And so you're going to be tempted to wish it away. Some of you parents in this place, you're wishing away a season with your children that you'll long for later. Some of you in this place, you're wishing away a relationship or a job or a career that you'll regret leaving if you do. Some of you in this place, you're bored and indifferent towards the things of God, and you're wishing away the season you're in. And it's like, oh man, I should be a pastor by now. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And you're wishing away the season when God has you in a circumstance, in a situation to where he's imparting things. He's growing you up. He's strengthening you. He's healing you. And you're wishing away the very thing that he's trying to do in you. Some of you, you hate the circumstances that you're facing right now. When you break down the word circumstance, it's circumference, right? That's where it comes from. Circumstance in its original form means the circle I stand in. And some of you hate the circle that you stand in right now. You're looking to say, oh, I want to get into a different circle. This circle's messed up. There's nothing good in this circle. But God is going to challenge that today. And he's going to challenge you today to think differently about the circumstances that you're facing. And so most Christians, when you look at their lives in the Bible, or actually the Christians today, we match up with the disciples of the Bible as well. Jesus, when he started preaching hard stuff, in John chapter 6, he's talking about some hard things that they couldn't understand. He said something like this to these disciples. And let me just say this. You may think of the 12 disciples sitting around the table. Well, within the 12 disciples, he had 3 that were really close to him, John, James, and Peter. And then also it says that there were many disciples. There were people, there were gangs of people. We use the word grips, man, a grip of people around him. And wherever he went, there were these crowds that would follow. But then he started seeing some things that were hard for them to hear. He started challenging the way that they believed, and he would say things that they couldn't understand. And when we hear things, or we're in a season when we can't understand, what do we want to do? We want to leave that season, right? We want to leave that circle. We want to leave that circumstance because we love to understand every fine detail. Why? Because it doesn't require faith. And these disciples, as Jesus says this stuff that just blasts me, says, you got to eat my flesh and drink my blood. They were like, oh, this is a cult. I saw that on Discovery Channel, And some of you, if I got up here and said, you got to eat my flesh and drink my blood, you're like, we're finding a new church today. And so I get it. But he wasn't speaking to them about natural things. He was speaking to them about spiritual things, things that come, things that they couldn't discern. What was their reaction to the season, to the words, and the things that were coming out they couldn't understand? I'm going to show you. In John 6:66 and 68, it says, from that time, many of the disciples went back and walked with him no more. You see what happened? They're grinding with Jesus. We're walking with Jesus. We're going from town to town. We're following him as he's teaching. He's doing miracles. We like that stuff. But all of a sudden, he starts doing things that they feel uncomfortable with. What are they going to do? They went back to where they came from. They're like, I don't think. We're going to distance ourselves from you. You're getting a little controversial. You're making me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I don't like this circle I stand in with you right now, Jesus. And then Jesus said to the 12, these are his closest disciples, he says, do you also want to go away? He says, what, you want to follow them too? And Peter gets a revelation. Something hits him, and Peter says, but Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. And what I want you to see today is that when you're in the grind, just a couple thoughts for you today, that when you are in the grind, when you're in the circle that you don't understand, your circumstances aren't making sense, and you feel that temptation to give up, when you feel that temptation to walk away from God, when you feel the temptation to leave where God has ordained and called you to, and I got to go on a search to find something else that makes me feel comfortable, that satisfies my flesh, that makes me feel emotionally good. When you feel that, there's something that I want you to remember. And it's what Peter realized, is that Peter realized this, that it's not always about what you do, it's who's with you. It's not always about what you do, it's who's with you. When you're in the grind and you're not happy about the things you're doing right now, you're tired of school, you're tired of that job. Maybe you wouldn't admit this to anybody else, but you're tired of raising kids. You're tired of changing diapers. You're tired of cooking dinner every night. You'd like to just go out and eat, but man, finances don't, they're limited, and you've got to cook, and you're in the grind. And you're tired of washing clothes. You're tired of mowing the grass. You're tired of doing these things that seem so mundane and meaningless, and you're ready to bail. One of the ways that you fight through that is that you remember that it's not just what you're doing. It's who's with you. And that's what Peter realized. They walked from town to town, town to town. They didn't have horses. They didn't have buggies. They didn't have cars. These guys were footing it, grinding, walking alongside Jesus. They were true disciples. And what Peter realized, it wasn't really what they were doing. It was the fact that God himself, Emmanuel, God with us, he was with them in this moment. And he gets this revelation, says, who are we going to go to? See, he remembered that this is the Jesus that spoke to the wind and the waves and that the sea was calmed. This was the Jesus that called him out and says, come on, walk on the water. This was the Jesus that healed the blind eyes. This was the Jesus that healed the deaf ear, the one who picked up the lame and said, pick up your mat and let's go, let's walk. Yes, it was that Jesus. And he had this revelation that it doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter. If I stand in this circle and I'm with him, then I've got everything I need. And some of you need to understand that today, that you are in the grind and you want to escape the way that it's making you feel. But I want to say today, it's not what you're doing, it's who's with you. And you need that revelation today. And it's not just about, who's with you, but it's not what you do. If I can get my next point, it's not what you do that adds value. It's who you do it for. Another thought for you today, that if you're in the grind and you want to quit, let me say, you've come too far to quit. You got too much invested to turn back. But remember this, that it's not what you're doing today. It's not that job. It's not just the changing the diapers. It's not mowing the grass or washing the car. It's not all those little fine details, getting stuck in traffic, driving 40 minutes to work or an hour to work. It's not just what you're doing that adds value. It's who you're doing it for that will allow you to endure the grind. See, if I cook a fancy meal and some steaks and asparagus and all this stuff, and I sit there by myself, that's not really that fun. But when I realize that I have guests of high honor and people that I respect, and they took time out of their busy schedule to come and to hang out with me, and I cook a meal, it's not just that I cooked the meal, it's who I did it for that adds value. And this is what allows us to grind. This is what allows us to endure, is when you realize that you can take anything and everything you do and you can commit it to the Lord. See, Paul did this in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. It says this, therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. The mundane tasks, the things that seem so meaningless, the things that you're bored with, if you will commit those things to God, then they take on great significance. So it's not just about what you're doing, it's who you're doing them for, if you'll commit them to the glory of God. And that changes everything. It changes our perspective. And the lie is that the mundane is meaningless. And some of you may believe that today. You're like, oh man, I can't wait till I'm doing bigger things. Can't wait. I know I'm single, but I just can't wait till I'm married. Listen, your life has meaning even if you're not married. Oh, I just can't wait till I graduate and finally get my degree. Your life has meaning if you'll commit everything you're doing, you're studying to the Lord. If you'll commit you showing up on time to class to the Lord. If you'll commit to being faithful and not missing and skipping. If you commit everything you do to the Lord, it takes on great significance if you'll commit it to him. So let me give you 2 questions that you should ask yourself every single day. And if you're not taking notes, you should be taking notes on this. You need to ask yourself today, is what if the work is the reward? What if the work that you're doing is the reward? So you're going, no, if I finish it, then the reward is the diploma. If I finish, then the reward is the promotion. If I finish, the reward is the marriage certificate. If I finish right, then the reward is that little baby certificate. Not realizing that if you commit everything to the Lord, the work is actually the reward. And what if the prize is in the process? What if the prize is in the process? See, if we're trying to escape the circle that I'm in, not realizing that the things that I've been called to do and ordained to do, that's actually where I find the reward. But if you escape it, you got to come back to it because God's not going to change his mind. God's not going to move. We are the ones that walk in step with him, not him with us. And what if the process that he has you in right now, what if you're under that employer and you're just like, oh man, like this guy's like terrible. But what if God's doing something in your circumstance, the circle you stand in right now, and he's processing some things out of you. He's sanctifying you. He's changing your attitude. He's changing your perspective. He's strengthening you because you can endure more. Maybe before you're an emotional basket case, you get offended about everything. Everything you say, what do they mean by that, man? How do they do? And now all of a sudden you're just steady. You've matured, you've grown, but the only way that you've grown and matured is because you've been tested. You're battle tested at this point. Some stuff has come against you. You're like, you know what? I'm not going to be moved by that. The enemy, no, I'm not moving. You can push as much as you want. The power of God inside of me is stronger than any force from the outside. I'm not moving. I'm growing. And some of you, you're trying to escape that place, not realizing the process that you're in right now is the very thing that you need, that it is the prize that God has for you. He's teaching you to be patient. He's teaching you to be kind. He's teaching you self-control. He's teaching you how to be gentle when you want to go off. He's teaching you how to love people that are unlovable. He's teaching you how to have joy in circumstances that don't typically lead to joy. He's processing something inside of you, and you must remain in that circle, not try to escape it. So let me say to you again, church, you've come too far to quit now. You've come too far to quit now. Some of you invested 10, 20, 30 years in your job and you're going to quit now? You've invested in that marriage 10, 20, 30 years and you're going to quit now? You've invested in those kids and they're almost raised and you're going to quit now? You've been grinding in ministry and you're going to quit now? What's led you to this point? What's caused you to contemplate leaving your circumstance in the circle that you stand in? Because if you remember this, it's not what you do, it's who's with you. God is with you in that circle. It's not just what you do that adds value, it's who you do it for. So if you're committing everything to the Lord, even if it's difficult, you can stand in this place and receive a reward. You can receive a prize if you don't quit. Come on, is that ministering? Is this speaking to anybody here today? Because your perspective, my perspective, what it does, it determines how I package the grind. Okay? Your perspective is going to determine how you package the grind. I was thinking about this yesterday. I grabbed this little trash can. That some of you package the grind as something that needs to be disregarded, discarded. I need to get this out of my life. Tired of being in the grind. Need a new career, need a new job. I need new relationships. I need new this. I need more money. I need to sign up for some more classes. I need to just do something different. And you're trying to do something different, and you're taking what God has given you because, listen, the grind is a gift. Because it's the very place that you find the reward. It's the very place that you find the prize, is in the grind. And some of you are being tempted to throw it all away. So it's either going to be in the wastebasket, or you can have the perspective of seeing it as a gift. So one you disregard and one you guard. And so for some of you, you need to ask yourself today, what are you trying to discard right now that God calls a gift? What are you trying to get rid of right now? What are you trying to walk away from? What are you trying to leave right now that you're calling it trash? You're calling it hopeless. You're calling it something that needs to be done away with and given away. And God is saying, no, that was a gift. And so your perspective will cause you to shift this. Listen, your grind today, the things that are meaningless, the mundane, it is a gift from God if you will allow him to give you the revelation to package it correctly. See, Paul, the apostle, we talk about him a lot. He wrote the majority of the New Testament. And one of the things that was beautiful about this guy is that he was tenacious, and he stood in his circumstance, which was more difficult than any of the things that you and I have faced, probably in this entire room put together. I've never been beaten and left for dead multiple times. I've never been stoned, and I'm not talking about getting high. Never been stoned with literal stones and left for dead. I've never been bit by a snake that was poisonous that should have killed me. I've never been in a shipwreck. I've never been floating out at sea in the middle of the night when it's cold and there's sharks and everything else in the water. I've never been thrown into prison and shackled with feces and everything around me. I've never been, I haven't experienced those things, and most of you haven't either. And Paul was one who experienced tremendous rejection every single day from his days of being born again. He started preaching the gospel, and people would shut him down. People would reject him. Get out of here with that. And some of us, we've never even shared our faith with anybody. And I don't say that to put you down. I say it to help us see that this guy was committed to stand in the circle in his circumstance, the circle that he was in. And to see that him serving God, even in the most difficult times, was the reward and was the prize. And there was something that he relied upon that I want you to get today. In 1 Corinthians 15:10, it says this. It says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am." Do you realize that it's God's grace in your life that you are who you are today? That you have the skill set, you have the gifting, you have the anointing, you have the calling on your life by the grace of God. He's given it to you. The circumstances, the kids that you have, they are a gift from the Lord. And here we are wishing them away, but it is a gift. The relationship, the marriage that you have, that person that loves you, that is a gift from the Lord. That is his grace. Everything that you have, we receive by his grace, and we are who we are today because of him. Someone are like, oh, I'm a self-made millionaire. I'm a self-made this. I'm this. No, you're not. It's by the grace of God that you are who you are today. And he says, and his grace towards me was not in vain. What he's saying is that his grace towards me, the things that he's implanted in me, the things that he's given me, he says, it wasn't in vain. I didn't waste it. I didn't waste it. I didn't overlook the gift that he gave me. And he says this, he says, but I labored more abundantly than they all. He's saying, you know what? I got to work because I saw that the work was the reward. I got to work because I saw that I was going to dive into this process. And although it was hard, it was the prize was in the process. And he says, yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. And let me just give you a little definition of grace in the context of what we're talking about today. Is that grace is God's operational power that keeps me going strong when others would have given up. Let me say it again, that grace is God's operational power. It's his empowerment. Yes, it's unmerited favor, but it's more than that. It's God's operational power. It's his power that comes upon me. It's his power that works in me that keeps me going strong when others would have given up. And that's what Paul is saying, is you know what? I have every reason to give up. But it's by the grace of God. It's his grace. It's his operational power in my life that has allowed me to stand strong when others have walked away from the faith. When Demas left, when John and Mark left, when all those people turned their back on God, I stayed strong. I took the beatings. I took the whips. I took the imprisonment. I took the snakes. I took the shipwrecks. I took all of it. But it wasn't just in my power. It was by the grace of God working in me. And for some of you, you're wanting to quit today, and I'm here to tell you that if you are a born-again Christian, God's operational power is available to you to endure, to stand strong when others would have given up if they were in your situation. Some of you are like, Pastor, you don't know about my marriage. Pastor, you don't know about my kids. They're crazy, man. You don't know about my job, my boss, he's horrible. You don't know about my neighborhood. You don't know about our finances. You don't know about the disease that's in my body. Yes, I don't know, but I do know this, that God is sufficient. His grace is sufficient. And that, listen, come on, that is something to get excited about. It's not me, it's about him. His grace is sufficient in your time of need. His strength is made perfect in your weakness. Understanding that it's his operational power and it's made available. And this is what Paul stood on. And you and I can as well. So let me just say this, and let me ask a few questions today. What can you declare right now a task for the glory of God? What is it that you're facing right now that you can declare, this is something that I'm going to power through for the glory of God? What is it that you can move from the wastebasket to the gift box? What is it that you're trying to throw away right now that you can move and see it as a gift, that it is part of the reward that God has for you? And as I get ready to close here, I want to make you aware of an enemy. And the enemy to most people in the grind is this thing called the tell. It's a tell. You may be going, where is he going with this? I'm going to explain this to you today. See, boxers, MMA fighters, they don't just show up in the octagon. They don't just show up in the ring. Their grind starts months before, years before, even decades before. You just see them come out and they get into the ring and they do their thing. But for many of them, they build and they grind in secret. They train when everybody else is asleep. They're out there running 10 miles a day trying to build up their stamina. They're working on their skills. They're sharpening their hand speed. They're sharpening their technique. And they're grinding when nobody else sees. They're many times in tough circumstances. They're broke. They don't have money. But they've got a dream in their heart to be something. And so they work and they work and they work. And in the world, you're told that at the end, when they hold the belt, that's the prize. But what I know for many people that are in mixed martial arts, many fighters, that actually it's the person that they develop and become that actually makes them great. It's not just the achievement. But every fight has this thing called a tell. Every fight has a tell involved. And it's used for one of two purposes. One is that when the person comes and sits in the corner in between rounds, what do? It's to wipe the sweat. It's to wipe the tears. It's to wipe the blood away. Because that person's committed to the fight. That person's committed to the situation and the circumstance. The circle they stand in, they're not going to run. I'm in this ring. There's board. I can't get out of here. This is a win or lose situation. And so they're committed to the fight. And so many times the tell is what clears their eyes so they can see clearly. But the tell is also known as a tool of surrender and defeat. And this is an option that some of you have today. So you want to quit. You want to quit on your faith. You want to quit on God. You're being tempted to quit on your family, quit on your dreams, your hopes. And the enemy's tempting you to do this. I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel. No mas. Can't do this anymore. Can't handle one more fight with the wife or the husband. Can't handle any more financial bad news. Can't handle another D on my report card. I can't handle this. And you're ready to throw in the towel. And to those who throw in the towel, as I said earlier, in our culture, we don't like quitters. But here's the thing is that fighter, if he throws in the towel, you know what that does? It signals defeat, and it leaves him empty. Because the only one fighter wins. And to know that you trained for months, years, and to stand there and they raise somebody else's hand in victory, that's got to be one of the worst feelings. Know that you had a whole team that was dedicated to your success. You had a trainer, you had a nutritionist, you had all these people on your side, and you quitting and throwing in the towel wasted all of their efforts because nobody will ever remember you as a quitter. Those who are great are the people who continue to fight on even when it's difficult. Let me say to you today, church, you've come too far to quit now. You've come too far to quit now. Don't throw in the towel. Don't throw in the towel. 1 Corinthians 9:26, Paul writes, he says, therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight not as one who beats the air. You know what he's saying? He says, I'm not a shadow boxer. I'm the real deal. I'm the real thing. And I want to challenge you today, Hub City Church, that I would love to have you be so inspired today to say, you know what? I'm not just going to look like I'm a fighter over there, with quick hands. Have you ever seen those guys? Like, they got quick hands, and then you see them fight, you're like, those two things are not the same. But those who are willing to move past shadow boxing and really get into the grind, you start throwing haymakers that connect and destroy the enemy. And I want to challenge you, and I want to motivate you and call you to a different kind of life today, to where you say, you know what, I'm going to start throwing with the intention to connect to destroy darkness. I'm going to start connecting with the enemy, and I'm going to destroy everything that he's done in my generations. I'm going to destroy everything that he's done in my past. I'm going to destroy everything that he's done to my mom and dad, everything he's done to my grandfather and my grandmother. And I'm going to start fighting for my generations. I'm going to start fighting to make a difference and to destroy the darkness. And when I walk in, there's going to be light. When I walk into the room, there's going to be joy. When I walk into the room, there's going to be hope that is coming out of my mouth. There's no negative words. There's no unbecoming words. There's nothing that doesn't represent the kingdom, that the kingdom is going to flow from my mouth. And when I start to live that way, things start to change around me. The circumstances, that circle that I stand in, it becomes completely different. It's instead of darkness, it becomes a circle of light. Instead of it being a place where it's all black and white, it becomes clear and it's vibrant with color. Guys, this is the life that we can live even in difficult circumstances if we will realize that it's not just what you're doing. It's who's with you. It's not just what you're doing that adds value. It's who you're doing it for. And that I am going to be committed to keep fighting even when I feel like I can't keep going. 2 Corinthians 15. But you, our Chronicles, not Corinthians, but you be strong and do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded. Remember, the reward is in the work, my friend. Matthew 24:13. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. Some of you, let me just talk to you, man. You are lukewarm right now, and you're backsliding. Let me be clear with you. You've got to start fighting. You got to start fighting. Some of you guys used to read the word. You don't read the word. You haven't picked up a Bible in years. You haven't picked up a Bible in months. You come to church. And I don't say this out of meanness, but I say this as full truth. You are a shadow boxer. You're shadow boxing. You look the part, but you're not connecting. You're not doing anything for the kingdom. I'm keeping it real with you. And I'm not saying that to put you down and make you, oh man, I love feeling so guilty. I want to motivate you as somebody that would stand in the corner and say to a boxer, you got to keep going. Don't forget all the work that we've done. You can't quit now. We've done too much. You've come too far to quit. That's what I'm saying to you today. That some of you, you were so strong in your faith. You would worship and tears would flow, and now your heart has grown hard because you're offended with the church. You're offended with the pastor. It bothers you that I'm even talking to you this way right now. That you're offended with everybody and anybody. Some of you, you don't realize how far away that you've stepped away. And I'm just simply here today to sound the beacon, to sound the horn, to ring the bell, to say, listen, you have got to keep fighting. Don't quit. Don't wish this season away. Don't wish it away. For you young mommies that are raising those little babies and you're like, I can't change one more diaper. I can't make one more meal. I can't do one more load of laundry. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. For some of you that your marriage is on the rocks, let me just tell you, stop fighting with each other and start fighting for your marriage. You got to focus your attention and your energy in the right direction. God is with you. God is a restoring God. God is a redeeming God. Don't ever say that it's over. Don't ever say that it's too late. God can reach into your situation and he can give you that firepower, that supernatural grace to make dead things come alive. Don't discredit him. Don't speak against him in a way of calling him weak when he's strong. You got to keep fighting. So for some of you today, you got to fight to keep raising those generations, those righteous and godly generations. You know, my mom and dad, my dad got saved. God delivered him. And they started serving the Lord. And I am so grateful that my mom and dad kept fighting, because here's the beautiful thing. They fought battles because they did what they were called to do that I didn't have to fight, because they were willing to do it. They stood in their circumstance, their circle. They stood in their circle, and they didn't leave their post. They didn't run. My mom and dad, especially my mom, she came from a family of divorce. My grandmother was married multiple times. My grandfather was married multiple times. And you know what? My mom and dad said, you know what? That stops with us. We're going to fight this. Veronica and I have been married, going to celebrate 28 years. My brother's been married over 20 years. My sister's been married over 20 years. Do you get what I'm saying? It's that somebody stood in the gap and stood in the circle and said, it stops with us. It stops with me. No longer does enemy have his hands on relationships. My dad broke addiction. And he said, it stops with me. My dad broke all of these things and fought those battles so his son wouldn't have to. And Veronica and I have now fought battles in hopes that our kids wouldn't have to fight those battles. And my children will fight battles that my grandchildren won't have to fight if we won't quit. So let me say to you today, fight for your generations. Some of you need to fight for your marriage and don't give up. You need to show them that mommy and daddy can love one another for a lifetime, even if it's hard. Some of you need to fight for your sobriety. Why? Because your generations count on it. You need to slam those doors shut. Because many times what we don't realize is that the sins that we don't deal with, we make accessible to the next generation. And somebody's got to stand up and say, enough is enough. Got to fight for your sobriety. Some of you need to fight against that depression, fight against that anxiety. You need to fight against that disease, that diabetes. You need to fight, you need to fight, you need to fight, you need to fight. And stay committed. So don't wish this season away. And remind you that what you need is not out there. It's already here. And the work is the reward. And the prize is in the process. Did God speak to you today, church?